Well, the Labor Party is in the fight of its life, and yet some on the left seem to refuse to recognise it. In fact, I think some are so blinded by their elitism that they're actively willing into it. They're bringing it into being, not recognising that they will ultimately kill their own movement. As an example, in an exclusive report by Joe Hildebrand for news.com.au today, members of the Electrical Trades Union have revealed that they find the Labor Party too woke, too green lefty and stuffed full of inner city yuppies. When you look at the numbers, a quarter of ETU members no longer vote Labor and another 35% of them have decreasing support for the party. That makes 60% of union members who have either given up on or are considering giving up on what is supposedly the Workers' Party. Nearly 20% of them said that the Liberal Party better represented workers. This ought to be damning stuff for the ALP. I mean, this is a party that was built on the union movement, for the workers, by the workers, but now it would seem they've abandoned them. Wealthy, do-gooder, inner-city types have taken over the joint and are obsessed with climate change, gender issues, identity politics, change the date, yada, yada, yada. And I've said this before, but the ALP is being pulled in two directions. They're losing ground to the Greens in the inner city and they're losing ground to the coalition further afield. But for some reason, the party seems to have decided that they'll chase the Green vote and get those inner city seats back instead of trying to retain their traditional blue-collar base, generally in swinging electorates. It's just stupid politics. The loony Green left is a fringe group, for heaven's sake. But some people just don't seem to get it. Writer Jane Carrow during the week tweeted incredulously about the fact the ALP pre-selected Jeff Drayton, a coal mining union man, for the New South Wales Upper Hunter by-election. She wrote, "Honestly, why bother?" Maybe, Jane, because there are two large power stations in the Upper Hunter and those people might be worried about their jobs. But a chunk of the left who don't have to worry about money don't really like blue-collar workers because they don't serve the right purpose. They're not woke enough. You'll in fact find some of the biggest elitists and working man haters on the left. It's as true as it was when James Carville coined it nearly 30 years ago, and of course Bill Clinton used it. It's the economy, stupid. Keep ignoring workers and pushing woke wheelbarrows and the ALP will struggle to win another election. Michael, I mean, we saw what happened in Queensland at the last federal election, where the ALP thought they had it in the bag. Queensland came through and absolutely killed it for them, ostensibly because Bill Shorten was selling this climate change, renewable energy business, and people in Queensland, working class people in Queensland, felt like they would be left behind and they wouldn't have money to put food on the table. I mean, surely the ALP as a workers' party has to get off of this crap.
Well, you think so. I love the woke wheelbarrow image, Caleb. That's one of yours. You should keep that. That's great. Look, on the issue of the Upper Hunter by-election, I mean, I feel for the people of the Upper Hunter. I mean, I don't know who the hell they're going to vote for. Because, as you say, most of them are particularly around Singleton, which would be probably the main urban centre there. You know, a very big percentage of them either owe their living to coal mining or the business they run is frequented by people who make their money from coal mining or coal-fired power stations. So, you know, this idea that the Labor Party have selected someone who might, heaven forbid, be in favour of coal, I mean, blow me down, that might actually give them half a chance. But on the other side of politics, of course, I mean, the Nats are going to give it a crack, as will One Nation, but the Liberal Party, I mean, yeah, when you've got Matt Keane running the relevant policy in New South Wales, I don't think there'd be too many people around Singleton waving a blue L Liberal at an upcoming by-election there. I mean, this is a broad issue, and this issue is in the microcosm form being played out in this by-election. But Australia has some big questions to answer here as to our political parties. And look, dare I do it, to go back to what I said at the very beginning of the show. I mean, these are things that really should be front and centre, nutted out day in, day out in the media, because as a country, we've got to face the prospect of not being able to afford electricity, well, the average person anyway, or not having it there, no matter if you're as rich as Croesus. And if you don't have, Chris did a magnificent show before us from a coal mine. I mean, I'm not wedded to coal. There are alternatives. Nuclear is one, but we've got to get cracking. You can't build even a small modular reactor in 3 minutes. This thing takes time. But you've got to have dispatchable baseload power. And, you know, I mean, a lot of this ideological discussion is just that. It's missing practicality, and the people of the upper hunter will have their say.
I think you're right, Michael, the point about what do people actually care about. You know, in general, it's being able to have enough money to put food on the table, send your kids to school. These are the things that an average voter cares about. And the EasyU survey actually said, Sarah, that it wasn't that the members didn't care about climate change and social justice issues. It's just that they think the ALP now gives them far more weight than they do issues of the worker. Where do you think the ALP goes from here, Sarah?
Well, I think the ALP's been tussling with this for a long time, and certainly this survey that you're talking about, Caleb, is going to sharpen the minds of the party strategists as we head into the next federal election. But I would say ultimately they will go where they think the votes are. Now, is this survey enough to convince the party that it needs to change course and that Joel Fitzgibbon is the future, for instance? And I'm not saying that he would be the future leader, but that his side of this argument, as you say, the federal Labor learnt the lesson very hard way in 2019 that they were going down the wrong path. But we haven't really seen them pivot much under Albanese. The thing is, they haven't actually won an election convincingly since 2007 when Kevin Rudd beat John Howard. If I was running the ALP, I would go back there and say, why did we win? Did we win because John Howard had been in for too long? Because if that's the only reason, well, then they need to start executing that course of prosecution now against Scott Morrison and the Liberal Party. Did they win because the government had overplayed its hand on work choices? In which case, industrial relations. Go back to your point, Caleb, slightly different view of, being the party of the people and the working class voters. I think that's what really played into Labor's hands back in 2007. But like I say, they've either lost or they've only limped through. We also saw what happened in 2010 when Julia Gillard had to struggle to form minority government. So they don't really have anything to go back, and that's why they keep moving around saying, oh, we have to win over the hearts and minds. You call it wokeism, but they're obviously thinking, well, who else is going to stand up for principles if not us? This is something that happens in the Liberal Party too, can I just say. Some people would say, I'm conservative because I believe in small government, but then there's other people within the Liberal Party that say, well, I also believe in small government unless I want them to regulate, say, the rights of who can marry or what reproductive rights women can access. And then all of a sudden we see conservatism take on a different skew. So the thing is, sometimes these arguments happen not just at the grassroots membership level, but it also happens in cabinet. There's no easy answers.
Carolee, I think you well know, as I do, that elections are won and lost. They're fought in swinging electorates, and anything you pick up on top of that really is a bonus. You have to convince people in generally working to middle class swinging electorates that your agenda, be it Labor or Liberal, is the one that will do the best to give you a better life and give your children opportunity, etc. And in Western Australia, you had the very strange situation in your most recent state election of McGowan actually standing up and saying Zach Kirkup's climate change policy was completely off the charts in terms of the targets he wanted to hit, in terms of net zero emissions and this kind of thing. So, there are other reasons that the ALP did so well in the most recent election in WA, but it's clear, isn't it, that there is still a market, and in fact I think a very big market, for the ALP to stand up for the average person, the average worker, and say, completely cutting out coal-fired power, for instance, will deliver you higher bills.
Look, I'm certainly not going to give the Labor Party any free tips by any stretch of the imagination. Look, what I will say is, with elections, we saw in May 2019, we saw the Australian people that, they were taken for mugs by the Labor Party, and the Labor Party got a big whack, because people weren't willing to believe what they were actually saying. Just want to pivot a little bit and say that at the moment, I think John Kerry, the US envoy, is finishing his 3-day trip to Shanghai to see President Xi Jinping. And the thing is, we're all, trying to do this net zero emissions by 2050, and China's just straight away said, nah, we're going to do it at 2060, meaning we'll be languishing for a decade and there'll be a decade ahead. I think the most important thing is to get back to basics for all political parties, that if this pandemic and this last 12 months has shown us anything, as you so rightly said at the beginning of your editorial, Caleb, that all gender identity, climate change, this and that, pronouns, all that lefty rubbish is completely irrelevant when, as you say, workers need jobs, they need to put food on the table. And there's a reason why the union membership has been declining in many years, because they don't identify with the Labor Party anymore. They don't see the Labor Party as being able to serve what is in the best interests of themselves and their family, and they're looking for something else. And as you say, Michael, we need reliable baseload power. There's people in India and Africa crying out for cheap electricity all the time, and we're willing to stuff up our economy, and Labor is willing to do that to Australia as well. So I just think to myself, people have really got to think and weigh it up carefully. People in WA are now regretting, a lot of them are regretting what they did only a few weeks ago.